Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we plunge into the hidden currents of today's most complex issues.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're navigating a pretty turbulent digital sea, where fortunes can vanish in a blink and the line between groundbreaking innovation and, well, shadowy crime is constantly shifting.
It really is.
Imagine waking up to discover millions of dollars in cryptocurrency, assets you maybe believed were anonymous, untraceable, have simply evaporated.
It's a terrifying thought for anyone holding crypto.
And then the mind-bending question.
Hmm.
How do these massive sums, once stolen, get meticulously traced? And in a truly astonishing twist sometimes, how are they even recovered?
Yeah, the recovery part is often the most surprising element for people.
It's a reality many have faced, unfortunately, and it's far more intricate than you might initially think.
It is indeed. The digital frontier presents this fascinating paradox, doesn't it?
Yeah.
On one side, you've got unparalleled financial freedom, efficiency, innovation, amazing potential. But on the other, it creates entirely new avenues for sophisticated, globally coordinated criminal enterprises to operate with, frankly, alarming speed and scale.
That's exactly why our mission today is to try and cut through some of that complexity. We want to guide you through the sophisticated world of cryptocurrency crime.
Yeah, left the curtain a bit.
We'll explore the cunning tactics modern scammers deploy, the cutting-edge techniques, and they really are cutting-edge that law enforcement and private firms are using to track illicit funds across the blockchain.
Yeah, and the legal side, too. The battles victims face.
Right, those often arduous legal battles, and also the global efforts trying to build a more secure digital financial system. Our goal is for you to emerge with the essential insights into this rapidly evolving landscape.
So you can understand both the vulnerabilities, which are significant, but also the powerful tools that are emerging to combat them.
It's a vital understanding, isn't it? Especially as digital assets become more ingrained in our global financial system.
Definitely. Protecting yourself and also just appreciating the significant work being done to bring integrity and accountability to this space. It's increasingly important for everyone.
Okay, before we dive even deeper, just a quick word from our sponsor. This deep dive is brought to you by Stonefly. They're a leader in enterprise storage, backup and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions.
And in a world where digital assets are constantly at risk, having secure data infrastructure is paramount.
Absolutely. If you're looking for secure ransomware-proof storage, then Stonefly sells air-gapped and immutable storage. Now, to put it simply, air-gapped means your data is physically isolated from network connections.
Which makes it virtually immune to online attacks like ransomware. Can't hack what's not connected.
Exactly. And immutable means once data is written, it cannot be changed or deleted. That provides ultimate ransomware protection.
Really belt and suspenders security for critical data.
So you can contact them at sales@stonefly.com to schedule a demo. All right, now, let's really get into the heart of it.
Let's do it.
So let's begin by unpacking this with a truly compelling and honestly quite unsettling case study. It really illuminates the human face of this digital deception.
Okay.
The U.S. Justice Department recently made headlines with an unprecedented move, seizing over $225.3 million in cryptocurrency.
Wow, that's a huge number.
It's enormous. And this isn't just an abstract headline or a massive number. It represents real money stolen from hundreds, maybe even thousands of individuals through these really insidious confidence schemes and romance scams that preyed on, well, basic human trust.
The human element here is just profoundly disturbing. While that seizure amount is staggering, you have to remember it represents the aggregated losses of countless individuals.
Yeah, each one a story.
Exactly. Law enforcement initially began their investigation with, I think it was about 60 victims. They had reported losses totaling around $19 million.
Which is already a lot of money.
A huge amount. But that was merely the visible tip of a much, much larger iceberg. Those initial investigations, by meticulously following the digital trail, led them to discover dozens of other connected blockchain addresses.
Ah, so they followed the crypto.
Precisely. And that revealed that millions more had been deposited by countless other victims, expanding the scope exponentially. It just kept growing.
And the modus operandi of these scams, I mean, it's heartbreakingly familiar in the psychological manipulation, but it had this distinctly modern crypto twist, right?
It did. Victims were often contacted on social media platforms, think Instagram, LinkedIn, dating apps sometimes, by these seemingly charming, successful, often attractive individuals.
It's fake profile.
The classic fake profile, yeah. Often posing as crypto experts, young men or women. They'd slowly lure victims into what they believed were legitimate, highly profitable cryptocurrency investment
It
opportunities.
means building trust over time.
Weeks, sometimes months. Then they'd be directed to these slick, professional-looking fake cryptocurrency platforms. Websites designed to look totally real.
I bet.
Victims would be encouraged to send in significant sums, sometimes their entire life savings, or even money they borrowed, believing they were making incredible returns. They'd see fake numbers going up on the screen.
Oh, man.
But then, when they attempted to withdraw their supposed profits, suddenly they were hit with demands for more money. Fees, taxes, commissions, always an escalating sum needed to unlock their funds.
The old advance fee trick, but with a crypto layer.
Exactly. And then, once that final, often desperate payment was made, poof, they were completely locked out of their accounts, the funds vanishing into the digital ether.
God, imagine the devastation, the financial hardship, the emotional trauma, that profound sense of betrayal. Awful.
It truly highlights how these scams are less about technical sophistication at the start and really more about leveraging social engineering, grooming victims, like I said, for weeks or months before even introducing the crypto element.
And the geographic reach was huge, too, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, the victims were spread across states like Texas, Arizona, Virginia, Iowa, California, all over the U.S.
So it underscores the widespread impact of this kind of organized criminal activity. Just transcends state lines, hits communities everywhere.
Absolutely. And the fact that the U.S. Secret Service, a venerable law enforcement agency, stated this is their largest cryptocurrency seizure in history, that speaks volumes.
It says they're getting better at this.
It suggests a growing capacity, definitely. Not just to identify these crimes, but to effectively trace and potentially, hopefully, return these stolen funds, which is a massive undertaking.
Okay, but here's where this case truly shifts, I think, from just a scam, however horrible, to something far more sinister and well-organized.
Right.
Investigators didn't just stop at the victims or the initial digital trail. They meticulously traced the funds back to the actual operators, the people running the scam.
And where did that lead?
It led them to pinpoint locations primarily in Vietnam and the Philippines. This wasn't just a few lone wolves operating independently. It became clear this was a highly organized, sophisticated, and frankly, deeply disturbing operation.
This is where the power of digital forensics, those digital breadcrumbs as you called them, became absolutely crucial. Blockchain analysis is key here.
So following the transactions on the ledger.
Yes, but also combining that with proactive and crucial collaboration from the cryptocurrency exchange, OKX, and the stablecoin issuer Tether. That collaboration revealed significant and chilling details.
Like what?
Like the fact that nearly all of the 144 OKX accounts used for laundering these illicit funds were accessed via IP addresses located in the Philippines.
Wow, okay, so a geographic hub?
A definite geographic hub. And remarkably, almost all these accounts were associated with email addresses that used identical naming conventions, like very systematic.
Suggesting a standardized, almost corporate approach to setting up these fraudulent accounts. Not random at all.
Not random in the slightest. Very organized.
And it gets even more chilling when you consider the human cost potentially behind this.
Oh.
These accounts were opened using Vietnamese identification documents, okay? But the photos on those IDs appeared to have all been taken in the same single distinct location.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Prosecutors explicitly stated this strongly indicated the existence of a scam compound, like a dedicated physical location operating solely for the purpose of perpetrating these cryptocurrency confidence schemes and systematically laundering the proceeds.
A fraud factory, essentially.
Pretty much. They even uncovered photos where individuals were seen wearing lanyards with a company name, iTechno Specialist Inc., which apparently operates as a call center in Manila.
So they found the front company.
It seems like it. And further digging unearthed job postings seeking Mandarin-speaking applicants, even offering to pay for people to travel to the Philippines for these positions.
Oh, that's dark. That points towards.
It paints a stark, almost dystopian picture of a possible human trafficking and labor exploitation angle behind these operations, where vulnerable individuals are potentially coerced or tricked into participating in these large-scale frauds.
That truly raises an important and often overlooked question about the hidden human cost behind these sophisticated digital crimes. It's not just stolen money, it's potentially exploited people too.
And the evidence of centralized control over these operations is undeniable, right? You mentioned the IP addresses.
Yes, the same single IP address was used to access 132 of the 144 identified OKX accounts.
Incredible.
That just screams centralized management. This isn't a decentralized network of independent scammers. It's a tightly managed, industrial-scale fraud operation, likely leveraging human resources in a deeply exploitative manner to maximize illicit gains.
And just to demonstrate how far-reaching and, frankly, indiscriminate these scams are, consider the truly surprising case of Shan Haynes.
The bank CEO.
Yeah, the former CEO of Heartland Tri-State Bank in Kansas. Haynes was ultimately sentenced, I think, to 24 years in federal prison for stealing over $50 million from his own bank.
Okay, so he was a criminal himself.
Right, but here's the twist, and it's a profound illustration of the scam's effectiveness. Haynes himself, a bank CEO, apparently became a victim of these very same crypto confidence schemes.
Wait, really? He got scammed.
It appears so. He sent some of those stolen bank funds directly to the fraudsters running these romance or investment scams.
Wow. That underscores the idea that no one is immune. They prey on universal human vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Greed, loneliness, the desire for quick wealth. Doesn't matter who you are.
Exactly. It's a potent example showing how the tactics of these criminal groups are effective across a wide spectrum of individuals, regardless of their financial background or perceived sophistication.
And this case also connects to a broader, really troubling trend we see in the digital financial landscape. Cryptocurrency investment fraud has rapidly become one of the most costly crimes reported to the FBI.
What are the numbers like?
Over $5.8 billion lost last year alone, just from crypto investment fraud reported to the FBI. Billion with a B.
That's staggering.
Mhm.
And it really connects to the bigger picture, doesn't it? This paradoxical nature of digital assets.
It does. Blockchains offer this unprecedented transparency through their public, immutable ledgers. Every transaction is recorded.
Oh.
But the pseudonymous nature of transactions, where addresses aren't directly tied to real-world identities easily, combined with increasingly sophisticated ways to hide the money obfuscation techniques, creates fertile ground for fraud and large-scale money laundering.
That's the core paradox, isn't it? It's transparent, yet somehow hidden. Blockchains are celebrated for their immutability, recording every transaction for all to see.
Right.
Yet that pseudonymous nature makes it incredibly attractive to criminals. So how exactly do the authorities and private firms step into this digital realm? How do they connect those pseudonymous transactions to real-world identities and illicit activities?
Well, that brings us to the digital bloodhounds, as you put it, the world of blockchain forensics.
Okay, so how does that work?
That's precisely where the art and science of blockchain forensics step in. And what's fascinating here is how the traditional stages of money laundering, placement, layering, and integration apply directly, but with new complexities, to the crypto world.
Right, placement, layering, integration. Walk us through that in crypto terms.
Sure. Placement is when the illicit crypto, maybe from scams like we discussed, or hacks, ransomware, whatever, is first introduced into the, let's say, legitimate or seemingly legitimate financial system. Getting it onto an exchange, maybe.
Okay, getting the dirty money in the door.
Exactly. Then comes layering. This is often the most sophisticated stage. Here, funds are moved through various obfuscation services. We'll talk about things like mixers or cross-chain bridges, specifically designed to obscure their origin and ownership, making the trail confusing.
Hiding the source.
Precisely. And finally, integration. This is when the laundered funds end up in what appears to be legitimate financial systems, often by being converted back to fiat currency, dollars, euros, and then spent, invested, used to buy property, whatever, making it look clean.
And the scale of this problem is just immense.
It's truly staggering. Since 2019, estimates suggest nearly $100 billion has been sent from known illicit wallets to various conversion services globally.
$100 billion.
Essentially funneling dirty money into the broader financial ecosystem. And in 2022 alone, estimates were around $30 billion laundered via crypto. It's a testament to the criminals' ingenuity in exploiting these new technologies and just the sheer volume of illicit wealth flowing through the system.
So that layering stage seems critical. What are the main techniques they use?
Well, the art of layering is indeed where the sophistication really comes into play. One primary technique criminals use is sending funds through numerous intermediary wallets. Investigators often call these hops.
Like jumping from one address to another?
Exactly. Sending funds from wallet A to wallet B, then B to C, C to D, and so on, maybe dozens or even hundreds of times. It's designed specifically to create a convoluted trail, making it incredibly difficult to trace the original source of the funds back to the crime.
And that's becoming more common.
We've seen a growing trend here, definitely. Data suggests over 80% of illicit flows now go through at least one of these intermediary wallets, and often many more.
More hawks mean more transaction fees, though, right? Doesn't that cost them money?
It does. Each transaction incurs a network cost, but they clearly prioritize obfuscation over economic efficiency. The added complexity for investigators trying to untangle that trail is worth the cost to them.
Interesting trade-off. And within these flows, you mentioned a shift towards stablecoins.
Yes, that's a notable shift. Stablecoins, like Tether's USDT or Circle's USDC, now account for the majority of illicit transaction volume.
Why stablecoins? Just because the value doesn't fluctuate wildly.
That's a big part of it. Criminals, like legitimate users, don't want their illicit gains to suddenly halve in value due to market volatility while they're trying to launder it. Stability is useful.
Makes sense.
But this also introduces a unique, often overlooked risk for the launderers themselves. Stablecoin issuers, like Tether and Circle, actually have a centralized ability to freeze funds associated with illicit activity.
Oh, really? How?
They control the smart contract. So often in response to law enforcement requests or court orders, they can blacklist addresses and essentially make those stablecoins unusable. It's a control point.
So using stablecoins isn't a foolproof plan for them either.
Not at all. It's a critical distinction, and it raises an important question about the inherent control points that exist even within a seemingly decentralized crypto ecosystem.
And this is where data analysis comes in, identifying patterns.
Exactly. This is where advanced data analysis becomes incredibly powerful. Analysts can identify these intermediary wallets that act as consolidation points.
Consolidation points, meaning
Places where funds from multiple other illicit wallets are gathered together before being moved on in larger sums. Think of it like tributaries flowing into a river.
Gotcha. So finding those points is key.
Identifying these consolidation points is a critical step in mapping out entire criminal networks. It reveals the central hubs where stolen funds converge, often right before they try to cash out.
Okay, so wallet hops and consolidation points are one layer. What about more specialized services?
Right. Beyond simple wallet hops, criminals employ specialized crypto obfuscation services that are explicitly designed to break that on-chain link and provide a higher degree of anonymity. Mixers are a prime example.
Mixers, or sometimes called tumblers, right? How do they work?
Essentially, they work by blending cryptocurrencies from many users together in a large pool. You send your crypto in, it gets mixed with crypto from lots of other people, and then you receive different crypto out the other side. It makes it incredibly difficult, ideally impossible, to trace your specific coins through that mixed pool.
So it breaks the chain of custody.
That's the goal. Their popularity kind of peaked around 2022 due to increased regulatory scrutiny and some major takedowns. But they've actually seen a resurgence in 2024, particularly services with more sophisticated privacy features.
Which ones are prominent now?
Well, key players like WasabiWallet and JoinMarket continue to be widely used. And then there's the highly controversial Tornado Cash.
Tornado Cash, that was sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury, wasn't it?
It was. OFAC sanctioned it. Yet, despite that, it continues to see sustained high growth in illicit volume flowing through it. It's still a major tool for launderers.
Wow. But not all mixers survive, right?
No, definitely not. We've seen services like Samurai, for example, plummet in activity after recent Department of Justice action against its operators.
Yeah.
So enforcement does have an impact.
Okay, mixers are one tool. What else? Privacy coins.
Exactly. Then we have privacy coins like Monero, XMR, and Zcash, ZEC. These take obfuscation to an entirely different level because they build privacy directly into their blockchain architecture itself.
How's that different from Bitcoin or Ethereum?
Think of it this way. With a regular crypto transaction, like Bitcoin, everyone can see the sender's address, the recipient's address, and the amount transacted on the public ledger. It's pseudonymous, but the data is there. But with Monero, for example, it uses technology called ring signatures. It makes it like sending your transaction disguised within a crowd of other decoy transactions, making it virtually impossible for an outsider to tell which one is the real one.
So plausible deniability built in.
Precisely. It also uses stealth addresses, which generate unique, one-time addresses for each transaction, so the recipient's actual address isn't publicly linked. And confidential transactions obscure the transaction amount itself.
So sender, receiver, and amount are all hidden.
Essentially, yes. It's pretty close to a complete blackout for anyone trying to trace the flow of funds just by looking at the blockchain.
And Monero use is increasing.
The number of Monero transactions have been generally on the rise.
Yeah.
And it's particularly appealing to highly illicit actors, including, unfortunately, some terrorist organizations who have openly advertised Monero donation addresses because it's so hard to trace.
That must make exchanges nervous.
It does. This very appeal is why some centralized exchanges have actually delisted Monero, citing concerns over its potential for illicit use and the significant challenges it poses for meeting their compliance obligations.
Okay, so mixers, privacy coins. What about moving between blockchains?
That's where crypto bridges come in. These aren't about mixing or hiding within a single blockchain. They facilitate cross-chain transfers. They let you move assets, say, from the Ethereum blockchain to the Solana blockchain, or Polygon, or others.
And criminals use these for laundering.
Increasingly, yes. Malicious actors leverage these bridges to further obscure their funds. By moving assets across various blockchains, they add yet another layer of complexity to the tracing process. Each hop across a bridge can make the trail harder to follow.
Another way to muddy the waters.
Exactly. We've seen a pronounced surge in illicit value moving through bridges. It reached a new high of, I think, $234 million in just January 2024. And interestingly, a lot of that was driven by funds flowing from services like Tornado Cash to these bridges.
So mixing first, then bridging to another chain.
It seems like a common pattern. Further complicating the trail, it's just a constant evolving cat-and-mouse game between these obfuscation techniques and the forensic tools trying to keep up.
So once funds have been, thoroughly layered and obfuscated through all these hops, mixers, bridges, where do they ultimately end up? Where do criminals try to convert them into usable assets?
Well, the primary destination for illicit funds still, despite everything accounting for over 50% of the volume, is centralized exchanges.
Really, centralized exchanges. Even with KYC and AML rules, that seems counterintuitive.
It does seem a bit counterintuitive, yeah. But they offer crucial advantages for criminals trying to cash out. First, high liquidity. That means large amounts of crypto can be quickly bought or sold without dramatically affecting the price.
So they can move big sums fast.
Exactly. Second, ease of converting cryptocurrency back to fiat currency, like US dollars or euros. That's ultimately the goal for most criminals getting usable cash.
Right. Got to spend it somehow.
And third, these exchanges provide that vital integration point with traditional financial services, bank accounts, wire transfers. That helps criminals blend their illicit funds with legitimate activities and get it into the real economy.
But you said volume is trending down?
Yes, on a positive note, there is a noticeable downtrend in the overall volume of illicit funds being successfully received by centralized exchanges.
What does that suggest?
It suggests, hopefully, increasing efficiency in their AML programs. Better transaction monitoring, stricter KYC, faster responses to suspicious activity, a growing commitment to compliance across the major platforms.
That's definitely a good sign for the good guys. But what's truly striking, you mentioned, is the concentration of these funds.
Yes, that's fascinating. Despite hundreds of different exchanges and services out there that could receive illicit funds from sources like darknet markets, fraud shops, malware attacks, a high concentration of that money flows to just 5 specific centralized exchanges.
Only 5 handle the bulk of it.
A disproportionately large amount flows to just 5. This hints at a surprisingly small and maybe interconnected network of preferred cash-out points within the broader cybercrime community.
Which also makes them critical targets for law enforcement and regulatory disruption, I suppose.
Absolutely. Focus resources there, and you can potentially have a significant impact.
Okay, so centralized exchanges are the main destination. Where else does it go? You mentioned OTC brokers.
Right. Beyond centralized exchanges, over-the-counter or OTC, brokers are another significant destination, especially for larger amounts.
How do OTC brokers work differently?
They facilitate large, private trades directly between 2 parties. So instead of placing an order on a public exchange order book, a whale wanting to sell a huge amount of Bitcoin might go to an OTC desk who finds a buyer privately. It bypasses public markets, often offering better pricing for large blocks and ensuring greater privacy for the transaction.
Okay, more discreet.
More discreet. And while many OTCs are legitimate and regulated, there's a growing subset that specifically caters to off-ramping illicit funds, often operating with little or no KYC procedures.
The no questions asked kind of service.
Pretty much. We've actually seen advertisements for some, particularly China-based services, on platforms like Telegram. They openly boast about things like having sold a large amount of USDT stolen from overseas and offering 24-hour self-service redemption.
Wow, they're not even trying to hide it.
Some are quite brazen. And forensic analysis using tools like Chainalysis Reactor can visually trace the path, for instance, of funds from a major crypto hack moving directly to a known illicit China-based OTC broker. It demonstrates how these largely unregulated services serve as a direct pipeline for illicit gains to enter the traditional financial system, bypassing the controls on regulated exchanges.
It's clear that the methods for moving and hiding money are just constantly evolving, right alongside the technology itself. It's this relentless arms race.
It really is.
Yeah.
A continuous dance between innovation used for crime and innovation used to fight crime. And the steps are definitely getting increasingly complex and subtle.
Which brings us to how investigators are now leveraging these sophisticated new techniques and, importantly, behavioral patterns to spot suspicious activity on the chain. Even applying these methods to traditional criminals who are increasingly adopting crypto for money laundering.
Exactly. It's really about applying familiar financial crime detection techniques, things banks have been doing for years, but now applying them to the transparent yet often deliberately obscured ledger of the blockchain, looking for those telltale signs.
So what are some of these red flags or warning signs investigators look for on the blockchain?
Well, it's important to say up front that these aren't definitive proof of wrongdoing in isolation, right? One flag doesn't automatically mean crime.
Sure, context matters.
Absolutely. But these are patterns that certainly warrant deeper investigation, signaling a high probability of illicit activity when seen together or in certain contexts. One classic example, borrowed directly from traditional finance, is structuring payments.
Structuring. What does that mean in crypto?
It means deliberately making transfers just under established reporting thresholds to avoid triggering automatic scrutiny. For instance, the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, that intergovernmental body setting global AML standards, recommends that crypto transfers over $1,000 USD or EUR should be subject to the travel rule.
The travel rule requires sharing sender-receiver info, right?
Correct. It mandates that virtual asset service providers exchanges mostly share sender and receiver information for transactions above that threshold, similar to bank wire transfers. And in the U.S., you have the Bank Secrecy Act, the BSA, requiring traditional banks to report cash transactions over $10,000.
Okay, so criminals try to stay just below those numbers.
Precisely. What blockchain investigators consistently observe is a noticeable surge, a real spike, in transfers that are just below these thresholds. You'll see clusters of transactions at, say, $999 or maybe $2,999 if there's a 3K threshold somewhere, or $9,999 in the U.S. context.
Deliberately avoiding the trigger amount.
Exactly. Sending $9,999 instead of $10,000. These amounts, even just $1 less, are often designed specifically not to trigger the same level of automatic scrutiny or reporting requirements. It's a classic money laundering tactic, now meticulously adapted to the blockchain, indicating bad actors are consciously trying to fly under the radar of compliance systems.
That makes sense. What else? You mentioned intermediary wallets again.
Right. Another red flag we touched on earlier, the use of many intermediary wallets also applies here, but with a specific nuance in the context of compliance. While simply sending funds through multiple personal wallets isn't inherently suspicious on its own.
Normal people might do that for privacy or organization.
Sure. But our data shows that bad actors are increasingly using more intermediary wallets, specifically when they are converting funds at exchanges that have stringent KYC verification, compared to when they use exchanges that don't have strong KYC.
So they use more hops when dealing with the stricter exchanges.
It appears so. This strongly suggests an awareness of the AML KYC obligations on those platforms and a deliberate, more complex attempt to circumvent detection by creating a longer, more convoluted chain of transactions before the funds finally land at a regulated off-ramp where they might get flagged.
So it's like they're building a more elaborate digital maze specifically to throw off the KYC compliance systems.
That seems to be the logic, yes. And this also ties directly into the concept of consolidation wallets as another clear red flag.
We talked about those before, where funds come together.
Exactly. We've seen compelling examples from investigations into known scam groups, like those targeting the elderly. Victims would be directed to send funds to various different crypto addresses, maybe dozens of them. But then, analysis shows all those addresses systematically consolidating the stolen funds into a single, large wallet before it was swiftly cashed out, usually at an exchange or OTC broker.
So the money flows inwards to one point.
Correct. By querying and analyzing blockchain data, investigators can identify these major consolidation wallets. For instance, one analysis found that the top 100 Bitcoin consolidation wallets identified in 2024 collectively received an astonishing $968 million.
Yow. From how many sources?
From almost 15,000 distinct addresses flowing into just those 100 wallets.
15,000 sources into 100 wallets. That's a huge red flag.
An incredibly strong indicator of suspicious activity. Such a high number of distinct sources flowing into just a few consolidation points is highly indicative of something like a large-scale scam operation, a darknet market payout system, or some other organized illicit activity. It can reveal the central command points of a criminal operation.
Okay, structuring, lots of hops, consolidation, any other patterns?
Yes, another subtle but significant indicator can be payments made in rounded amounts.
Exact. Whole numbers. Rounded amounts. Like sending exactly 10 Bitcoin. How is that suspicious?
Well, while some legitimate users or traders might aim for whole number crypto holdings, analysis shows that known illicit actors, particularly those linked to sophisticated state-sponsored groups like North Korea's Lazarus Group, are known to break down large amounts of stolen funds into smaller, exact rounded amounts, say precisely 50 Bitcoin or 100 Bitcoin, and send these repeatedly, sometimes at high frequencies, to centralized exchanges.
That is interesting. Why would they do that? Seems less efficient than sending one big chunk.
It suggests a couple of things. It could be a methodical, almost professional approach to money laundering, maybe dictated by the laundering service they're using. Or it might prioritize speed and ease of liquidation over getting the absolute best exchange rate. It might be quicker or easier to find buyers or fill orders for exact whole units like 50 BTC rather than, say, 47.83 BTC.
Less about perfect economic efficiency, more about getting the money out of the crypto system fast, maybe before it can be traced or frozen.
That's likely part of the calculation, yes. Speed and ease of conversion into fiat.
Okay, one more. You mentioned mixer fees.
Right. Suspiciously large fees when using mixers can also be a strong telltale sign. Mixers, as we said, are designed to obfuscate the trail, but the transaction fees themselves can provide crucial clues.
How so? Don't you just pay the standard fee?
Usually, yes. But sometimes, particularly with mixers like Tornado Cash that had variable fee structures or priority processing options, you might see a transaction incurring an abnormally large fee, way higher than necessary.
Why pay extra?
If that unusually large fee payment coincides with inflows of recently stolen funds into the mixer, it can indicate a strong desire and urgency to quickly clear the funds, to push them through the mixing process faster and move them into the integration phase, getting them out the other side as quickly as possible. They're prioritizing speed, maybe paying a premium for it over normal economic efficiency.
Because the clock is ticking before law enforcement catches up.
Potentially, yes. This kind of urgent, seemingly uneconomical behavior is a classic characteristic often associated with illicit activity, where criminals are desperate to distance themselves from the source of the funds as rapidly as they can.
It's truly insightful how these seemingly small on-chain behaviors, transaction amounts, number of hops, fee sizes, when viewed through the lens of sophisticated analytics, can reveal so much about these highly organized criminal operations.
Absolutely. These heuristics, these patterns, are essentially helping law enforcement and compliance teams apply and adapt their traditional financial crime detection skills to this entirely new, transparent yet opaque digital frontier.
All this sophisticated tracing and analysis, it leads to the one critical, really tangible question for victims. How do they actually get their money back?
The million-dollar question, or in some cases, the multi-million-dollar question.
Exactly. This is where justice in the digital age comes into play, and it's a rapidly evolving legal landscape. One of the truly foundational steps in fighting crypto fraud has been the crucial legal recognition of cryptocurrencies as property.
That sounds basic, but it's huge, legally speaking.
It is. Courts in various jurisdictions around the world, the UK, US, Singapore, others have explicitly recognized crypto, like Bitcoin or Ether, as a form of property that can be legally owned and, importantly, legally recovered. This seemingly simple legal definition lays the essential groundwork for victims to pursue claims, much as they would for any other stolen asset, like a car or a painting or funds from a bank account.
That recognition is absolutely crucial. It provides the necessary legal basis for victims to act, and it gives courts the jurisdiction to issue orders concerning these crypto assets. Without that, it would be much, much harder.
So what does the victim's legal journey typically look like?
It often starts, as you might expect, by engaging specialist investigators, forensic accountants, blockchain analysts, to meticulously trace their lost crypto assets on the public ledger, following every hop, every layer, trying to pinpoint where the funds are now.
Finding the digital trail.
Finding the trail. Once that tracing is complete, and hopefully the illicit funds are located maybe sitting in a wallet in a known exchange, or linked to an identifiable entity, It enables the victim to go to court. They can seek court orders for disclosure of information.
Asking the exchange for info.
Exactly. Orders compelling cryptocurrency exchanges or OTC brokers or any other parties identified in the tracing process who may be holding or facilitating the movement of the stolen funds to reveal information about the account holders, KYC details, transaction history, IP addresses, anything that can help identify the fraudsters or the current location of the assets.
And once the bad actors, or at least the digital trail holding the assets, is identified,
then courts can grant some powerful tools. Things like worldwide freezing orders, also known as Monero injunctions in some places.
freezing the assets globally.
Yes, preventing the defendant from moving or dissipating those assets anywhere in the world. And also proprietary injunctions, which specifically assert the victim's ownership claim over the stolen crypto itself. These can often be granted even if the fraudster's real-world identity is still unknown. They can be issued against persons unknown.
That's vital, right? Stopping the money from moving further.
It's a critical first step. Stop the bleeding, preserve the asset while the legal case proceeds. What's more, some tokens, like Tether's USDT or Circle's USDC, have built-in technical functionalities that allow the issuing companies themselves to freeze funds associated with illicit activity directly on the blockchain.
We mentioned that earlier, so they don't even need to reach an exchange to be locked down.
Potentially, yes. The issuer can technically freeze the tokens in a specific wallet, though typically a court order or a formal law enforcement request is still required to trigger such actions by the issuer. They don't usually act unilaterally.
Okay, so freezing is step one. What kinds of legal claims can victims actually bring to get the crypto back?
Broadly, victims can bring different types of legal claims. Proprietary claims are often the most useful and powerful in the crypto context.
Proprietary means you're claiming ownership, right?
Exactly. These allow victims to claim a direct ownership interest in the specific crypto assets themselves, asserting that those coins still belong to me. This offers significant advantages,
Such as
priority if the fraudster goes bankrupt or becomes insolvent. Your claim attaches to the asset, not just a general claim against the person. And crucially, it offers the ability to recover the property itself, the actual Bitcoin or Ether, rather than just a monetary judgment for its value at the time of the lawsuit.
which is huge in a volatile market if the price has gone up.
Absolutely. Getting the coins back could be much better than getting the dollar value from 6 months ago. Now, there are some legal distinctions here between different types of fraud. In what lawyers sometimes call Category 1 fraud, think of the romance scams, where the victim is fraudulently induced to transfer the crypto voluntarily. Based on lies, legal title technically passes to the fraudster at the moment of transfer.
Even though it was fraud.
Yes, initially. But the victim immediately gains what's called an equitable right to rescind, basically. The right to undo the transaction and reclaim the equitable ownership because of the fraud.
Okay, and the other type?
Category 2 fraud is essentially outright theft. Think of a direct hack of a wallet where the owner never consented to the transfer at all. In those cases, legal title may actually remain with the victim from the outset. The thief never truly gets good title. This can make the victim's proprietary claim to recover the asset even stronger.
So proprietary claims are about getting the specific crypto back. What are personal claims?
Personal claims are claims against individuals like the fraudsters themselves, if you can identify them, or potentially against third parties for their actions. So you might sue the fraudster for causes of action like misrepresentation, deceit, or maybe conspiracy.
Okay, suing the person for damages.
Right. Or you might sue a third party, maybe an exchange, or someone else who helped for things like dishonest assistance, if they knowingly helped the fraud, or knowing receipt, if they received the stolen assets knowing they were stolen, or turning a blind eye.
Can victims sue the exchanges directly?
They often try. Victims might argue the exchange breached a contract or maybe breached a duty of care or trust, perhaps by having inadequate security or AML procedures that allow the fraud to happen or the funds to be laundered.
But exchanges probably fight back hard.
They do. Exchanges have defenses. A common one, especially for proprietary claims, is if they use pooled accounts or hot wallets.
Where everyone's money is mixed together.
Exactly. If individual user funds are commingled in large omnibus accounts, the exchange might argue it's impossible for the victim to trace their specific stolen coins into the exchange's current holdings, thus defeating a direct proprietary claim against the exchange itself. Makes it much harder to prove these specific coins held by the exchange are mine.
That sounds like a big hurdle. And what about the tracing challenges we discussed earlier? The mixers, the chain hopping?
Those are definitely significant challenges for victims trying to follow the money trail legally. Criminals deliberately use techniques like chain hopping, swapping stolen Bitcoin for Monero, the Monero for Ether, then bridging that Ether to another chain, specifically to break the chain of traceability.
Making it legally harder to follow.
Yes. Pooling wallets, as we discussed, mixing funds from various sources to muddy the trail. And using empty wallets, rapidly moving funds across multiple newly created addresses, often leaving a trail of quickly emptied accounts behind them, designed solely to complicate investigations and make it harder, legally and technically, to follow the money.
But do these tactics completely defeat a victim's claim?
Not necessarily. Courts are getting more sophisticated. For instance, even if tokens are mixed in a pooled wallet, conventional legal rules for tracing into mixed funds, like the first-in, first-out principle, or sometimes proportional sharing, can sometimes be applied by courts to identify what portion of the mixed fund belongs to the victim. It's complex, but not always impossible.
And regulations might help too.
Yes, newer regulations like the UK's robust implementation of the FATF travel rule, which mandates information sharing for crypto transfers over certain thresholds between VASPs, should significantly assist victims in the future. It makes it harder for criminals to anonymously hop between different exchanges or service providers without leaving an information trail.
Okay, but what about innocent third parties? If the stolen crypto gets sold to someone who didn't know it was stolen?
That brings us to another significant legal hurdle, the bona fide purchaser for value without notice defense, often just called the BFP defense.
The innocent buyer defense.
Essentially, yes. This is particularly relevant in those Category 1 fraud cases, where legal title technically passed to the fraudster initially. If a third party later acquires legal title to that stolen crypto without notice of the original fraud, in good faith, and having given valuable consideration, meaning they paid for it, they may be protected by this defense.
So the original victim might lose their claim to get those specific assets back.
They might. The innocent purchaser might get to keep the crypto. Think of buying a used car. If you buy it from someone who seems legitimate, pay fair market value, and have no reason to suspect it was stolen, you might legally be protected even if it later turns out it was stolen. The same principle can apply to crypto.
That seems like a major risk for victims, especially if crypto moves fast through exchanges.
It is a critical challenge, especially when crypto assets are pooled on exchanges, making tracing difficult, or sold rapidly to potentially innocent buyers in the market. However, there are mitigating factors that help the victim.
Such as?
First, the burden of proof is often on the defendant, the person claiming to be the innocent purchaser, to actually prove all the elements of the defense. They have to show they acted in good faith, gave value, and had no notice.
So it's not automatic?
Not at all. Second, the BFP defense typically only applies to protect against equitable claims like the right to rescind in Category 1 fraud. It usually doesn't defeat a claim based on retained legal title, like in Category 2 theft cases. The rules can be complex and vary by jurisdiction.
Okay.
And crucially, if an exchange or another third party receiving the crypto had any notice of the fraud, and notice can include not just actual knowledge, but also constructive knowledge, knowing facts that would put a reasonable person on inquiry, or even just willful blindness, deliberately ignoring red flags, then the BFT defense usually crumbles.
So exchanges need to be careful. If there are red flags, they can't just ignore them.
Exactly. This puts pressure on exchanges and other intermediaries to have robust AML and fraud detection systems. If they ignore obvious signs of illicit activity, they risk losing the protection of the BFP defense if sued by a victim.
So putting it all together, even with these challenges, it sounds like there's a growing certainty, or at least possibility, for victims to recover funds, especially if the assets can be traced to an exchange or some identifiable entity.
Yes, the legal frameworks are adapting, and courts are becoming more familiar with these assets. And what's truly groundbreaking is how enforcement actually getting the assets back is becoming tangible in the digital realm.
How so? Beyond just freezing orders.
Yes, courts are not just ordering fraudsters to pay fiat sums, which might be impossible if they've vanished.
Yeah.
They can issue direct delivery orders, compelling an exchange or a fraudster who holds the victim's crypto to actually transfer the specific crypto assets back to the victim.
Ordering them to send the Bitcoin back.
Exactly. Or, if a victim gets a judgment for a fiat sum, courts can grant third-party debt orders against, say, an exchange holding fiat currency for the fraudster. This compels the exchange to pay the victim directly out of those funds held for the fraudster.
Okay, those sound like powerful tools, similar to traditional enforcement. But you mentioned something truly revolutionary earlier. about changing code.
Ah, yes. This is where it becomes really cutting edge and genuinely challenges our traditional understanding of digital asset immutability. Courts are, in some very specific contexts, issuing mandatory injunctions for code amendments.
Mandatory injunctions for code amendments, what does that even mean?
It means courts have actually mandated that new software code be written or existing blockchain protocol code be altered, specifically to effectuate the transfer of cryptocurrency back to its rightful owner, or to allow the owner to regain control.
Wait, a court can order someone to change the code of a blockchain or a related application?
In certain circumstances, yes. We've seen cases, for example, involving lost access due to bugs or alleged developer misconduct, where software developers were required by court order to implement patches or updates to regain control of assets that were thought to be permanently lost or inaccessible due to the existing code.
That pushes the boundaries of legal enforcement way beyond just ordering money transfers. It's like ordering the digital locks to be changed.
It's directly intervening in the digital ledger or the applications built on it. And it really came to a head with that blacklist manager system developed for the Bitcoin BSV blockchain.
Tell me more about that. That sounds like a direct legal override of blockchain principles.
It absolutely is a direct and profound challenge to the core idea that a blockchain is an unchangeable, immutable record, completely free from external control. And it signals the increasing ability, or at least willingness, of legal systems to impose real-world legal consequences, even if it means intervening directly with the digital ledger's operation.
So how does this blacklist manager work?
Essentially, a formal court order, say, declaring certain BSV coins as stolen and belonging to a victim, is converted into a specific, machine-readable digital format. This digital blacklist notice can then be broadcast to the network.
And what does the network do with it?
The system is designed so that the major mining entities on the BSV network can automatically incorporate this blacklist. It influences their transaction validation software to reject any future transactions attempting to move those specific court-ordered blacklisted coins.
So the miners essentially enforce the court order by refusing to process transactions with those stolen coins.
That's the mechanism. So it's not just a legal opinion sitting on paper. It's translated into a direct, technical enforcement mechanism that actively influences the behavior of the blockchain network itself, preventing the movement of those assets.
That raises huge questions, doesn't it? About decentralized governance and immutability, the core tenets of many blockchains.
Massive questions. If a court order, enforced through the cooperation, or perhaps legally compelled cooperation, of major network participants like miners, can effectively freeze or even potentially enable the reassignment of assets directly on the blockchain, what does that mean for the fundamental principles crypto was supposedly built upon?
It suggests that maybe no digital asset is truly beyond the reach of legal authority, even if that authority has to get involved in redefining some of crypto's foundational ideas or compel changes to the code.
That seems to be the direction some legal systems are heading. It essentially says that the real-world legal system can and will find ways to exert control, even over supposedly immutable digital ledgers, when necessary to provide remedies for fraud or theft.
So the law is not just catching up, but in some fascinating, perhaps controversial cases, it's even pushing the boundaries of what's technically possible in the digital realm, directly impacting the very code that runs these systems. That's a powerful shift.
A very powerful shift, with implications we're probably still only beginning to understand.
That's a powerful shift indeed. The legal landscape is constantly adapting, constantly evolving, which naturally leads us to the broader global efforts underway to try and build a truly secure and resilient digital future for finance.
Yeah, moving from remedy to prevention, really.
Exactly. And it's abundantly clear that effective prevention of crypto money laundering and illicit finance requires a truly multifaceted approach. It's not just one thing. It needs strong, harmonized regulatory measures across borders.
Absolutely. Consistency is key.
Plus cutting-edge technological innovation and seamless global cooperation, both between governments and, crucially, between the public and private sectors.
And at the very heart of coordinating that global regulatory effort is the Financial Action Task Force, or FATF.
FATF comes up a lot. Remind us what they do.
They're an intergovernmental body, kind of like a global standard setter for financial crime. They don't pass laws themselves, but they develop and promote internationally endorsed recommendations, the FATF standards, for combating money laundering, terrorist financing, and proliferation financing. Their guidance on virtual assets has become the global benchmark that countries are expected to implement into their own national laws.
So they set the tune, and countries follow.
That's the idea. They monitor countries' progress in implementing the standards through peer reviews and can even grey-list or blacklist countries that are deficient, which has significant economic consequences. So countries take FATF recommendations very seriously.
And regions worldwide are actively stepping up to implement these crypto standards, aren't they?
Oh yes, definitely. We're seeing significant movement globally. In the European Union, for example, directives like the 5th Anti-Money Laundering Directive, 5-AMLD, already brought many crypto businesses under AML regulation, requiring transparency and enhanced due diligence.
And they have more coming.
They do. The EU's Transfer of Funds Regulation, or TFR, which specifically applies the FATF's travel rule to crypto assets, is coming into full effect across the bloc in December 2024. That mandates V8SPs, again, think exchanges, wallet providers, to collect and share sender and receiver information for crypto transfers over certain thresholds. Big step for traceability.
Just like banks do with wire transfers now.
Exactly the same principle. And beyond that, the EU is finalizing a really comprehensive new AML package, including a new AML regulation, AMLR, a new AML authority, AMLA, to supervise directly, and an updated 6th AML directive, 6-AMLD. The goal is to harmonize supervision and create a single unified AML rulebook for the entire EU, covering crypto assets fully.
So a much more unified approach in Europe. What about other major hubs? Singapore.
Singapore is another leader here. They're globally recognized for having a pretty robust regulatory framework already under their Payment Services Act, or PSA. They've progressively expanded regulation to cover more types of VASPs, including custodial service providers, ensuring they all meet strict AML-CFT obligations under the Monetary Authority of Singapore's rules, like MAS Notice PSN02. Very proactive.
Hong Kong too, right? They've been active.
Yes. Hong Kong Securities and Futures Commission, the SFC, has implemented rigorous AML-CFT requirements for virtual asset trading platforms under their Anti-Money Laundering Ordinance, AMLO. They've got mandatory licensing now for exchanges serving retail clients, and they're even proposing new regulations to license over-the-counter, or OTC, crypto service providers too, closing a potential loophole.
Trying to cover all the bases. How about the UK?
The UK is also highly proactive. The Financial Conduct Authority, or FCA, supervises crypto asset businesses for AML purposes. What's particularly powerful there, as we touched on briefly, is recent legislation giving UK law enforcement the ability to seize crypto assets linked to crime before an arrest is even made.
That seems critical for preventing funds disappearing.
It's huge in fast-moving crypto cases. And their public-private collaborations are really important too. Things like the Joint Money Laundering Intelligence Task Force, JMLIT, where banks and law enforcement share intelligence directly, and the Joint Money Laundering Steering Group, JMLSG, which provides detailed industry guidance on interpreting regulations. These foster vital information sharing and help develop best practices.
What about the UAE? They're aiming to be a crypto hub.
They are, and they've matched that ambition with regulation. The UAE has introduced comprehensive AML-CFT obligations for VASPs under federal decree law, OJT, and specific guidance from their central bank. VASPs there need to conduct thorough risk assessments, implement robust internal controls, perform customer due diligence, and report suspicious activities to their financial intelligence unit.
And finally, the U.S. They've been involved for a while, haven't they?
Yes. The U.S. has actually had a relatively long-standing position. FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, part of the Treasury Department, issued guidance way back in 2013. They clarified then that crypto exchanges and certain other types of crypto businesses generally qualify as money service businesses, or MSBs.
And MSBs fall under existing rules.
Exactly. As MSBs, they are subject to the requirements of the Bank Secrecy Act, or BSA. That includes registering with FinCEN, implementing robust AML programs, conducting KYC on customers, monitoring transactions, and reporting suspicious activity, SARS. So the core AML framework is applied to crypto exchanges in the U.S. for over a decade now.
So it seems like there's a global convergence towards applying established AML principles to crypto, but with specific rules like the travel rule added on.
That's a good summary. Adapting existing frameworks and adding crypto-specific requirements where needed.
So beyond just the regulations themselves, what practical strategies are proving most effective on the ground in actually preventing illicit activity?
Well, first and foremost, enhanced KYC and AML protocols remain absolutely imperative, and they're constantly evolving. This isn't just about collecting a copy of an ID anymore.
Right. It needs to be more sophisticated.
It does. It's about deeply verifying customer identities using multiple sources, Understanding the customer's expected activity, understanding the source of their funds, and crucially, continuously monitoring their transactions throughout the relationship for suspicious patterns that deviate from their profile. Risk-based approach.
And technology must play a huge role in that monitor.
Oh, massive. A huge game changer is the widespread adoption of advanced transaction monitoring systems. Both traditional financial institutions dealing with crypto and crypto-native firms themselves are increasingly deploying sophisticated software, often using AI and machine learning.
How does AI help here?
These systems can analyze millions, even billions, of transactions in real time, looking for subtle anomalies, hidden links, or complex patterns that a team of human analysts could simply never catch. Imagine an AI learning to spot the specific signature of structuring payments across multiple accounts, or identifying a previously unknown cluster of seemingly unrelated wallets that suddenly consolidate funds just before moving them to a high-risk exchange known for illicit activity.
So it's not just screening against known bad addresses, it's finding new threats.
Exactly. It's moving beyond simple blacklist screening towards predictive analytics and network analysis, proactively identifying potential illicit networks or emerging money laundering typologies. We're seeing data showing a huge increase in the volume of transactions being screened by these advanced compliance products.
And that suggests?
It indicates a growing commitment across the industry to actually prevent illicit funds from entering, or just as importantly, exiting the crypto ecosystem through their platforms. More screening, hopefully, means more bad actors caught and faster.
That's a powerful development. But crime is global. What about cooperation?
That's the other absolutely essential piece. Because criminals exploit regulatory gaps and jurisdictional boundaries like nobody's business, cross-border collaboration is non-negotiable.
So countries need to work together.
They do. We're seeing a significant increase in coordinated international efforts. Things like joint investigations, intelligence sharing agreements, and cooperative operations between law enforcement agencies in different countries targeting specific illicit crypto activities. Public-private partnerships are also a cornerstone here.
Like the UK's JMLAT you mentioned.
Exactly like that. Platforms where valuable information, threat intelligence, and best practices can be shared quickly and effectively between regulatory bodies, police forces, financial intelligence units, and the financial institutions themselves, both traditional banks and crypto firms. Criminals don't respect borders, so the fight against them can't afford to either. Everyone needs to be talking to each other.
Makes perfect sense. And technology underpins all of this, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The power of technology and innovation in this fight cannot be overstated. Blockchain intelligence firms, for example, are developing incredibly sophisticated analytical tools. We're at a point where sometimes just starting with a single suspicious wallet address can allow investigators to map out and expose vast, interconnected criminal networks, tracing their entire flow of funds across multiple blockchains and services.
Leveraging that transparency of the blockchain.
Precisely. Using cutting-edge data analysis, graph technology, and AI to identify threats, anticipate new criminal methods, and generate actionable intelligence that law enforcement can actually use to disrupt operations and seize assets.
It's a constant balancing act, though, right? Privacy versus security.
It absolutely is. That's the ongoing challenge. How do you balance legitimate privacy expectations for ordinary users with the imperative of security and preventing financial crime? How do you manage the often significant compliance costs in a way that doesn't stifle innovation, especially for smaller startups, while still maintaining the integrity of the financial system? There are no easy answers there.
And the ecosystem just keeps evolving so fast.
It does, which means ongoing education and skill development for investigators, for compliance officers, for regulators, even for the general public to avoid becoming victims, are absolutely vital to stay ahead of the curve. But ultimately, technology is empowering institutions. It's helping them improve compliance efficiency, automate detection, and achieve better outcomes, hopefully reducing reliance on some of the more cumbersome manual reporting and allowing them to focus resources on the highest risks. It's making the fight against financial crime potentially more effective.
It's a truly dynamic interplay, isn't it? Between human ingenuity on both sides and technological advancement, constantly adapting to counter new threats and exploit new opportunities.
Could have said it better myself.
And that brings us towards the end of this deep dive. We've journeyed through this really intricate world of crypto crime, from those devastating confidence scams run out of industrial-scale compounds in Southeast Asia, preying on basic human trust,
all the way to the sophisticated digital forensics used by law enforcement and private firms to trace, freeze, and sometimes recover stolen millions across complex blockchain trails.
We've explored the complex and, frankly, still evolving legal battles victims face to reclaim their assets, and the huge global push to regulate and secure this rapidly changing financial space. It's really a testament to human ingenuity, isn't it? Both for good and, unfortunately, for ill.
It really is. And that cat and mouse game we talked about, between the illicit actors finding new ways to exploit the tech and law enforcement developing new ways to counter them, it just becomes ever more complex, ever more nuanced as the technology itself advances.
And we've seen how legal systems are not only catching up, but in some cases are actively starting to influence, maybe even redefine the very principles of decentralized, immutable blockchains in their pursuit of justice and remedy.
Which leaves us with a truly provocative thought, I think, for you, the listener, to consider. Will that original promise of truly decentralized and immutable blockchain systems, supposedly outside the control of any single entity, ultimately be fundamentally challenged or perhaps completely redefined by the increasing ability and willingness of traditional legal systems and sophisticated technology to impose real-world consequences, even potentially to alter the digital ledger itself when deemed necessary?
That's a huge question. And what comes next? What new forms of digital crime, leveraging maybe AI or quantum computing or whatever is over the horizon, will emerge? And what new, innovative ways to combat it will we need to develop in response?
It's definitely a space that demands continuous attention, constant adaptation, and a lot of critical thinking from all sides: developers, users, regulators, law enforcement. Its future is still very much being written day by day.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the digital frontier. We really hope you feel more informed, maybe a bit more intrigued, by this complex dance between innovation, crime, and the pursuit of justice in the fascinating world of cryptocurrency.
Thanks for listening.
And one last time, we want to thank our sponsor, Stonefly, for making this deep dive possible. They are a leader in enterprise storage, backup, and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions.
Remember, if you're looking for secure, ransomware-proof storage, Stonefly sells air-gapped, physically isolated and immutable, unchangeable storage options.
To learn more or schedule a demo, you can reach out to them at sales@stonefly.com. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.